Good morning, everybody. I think we should start with a pollen count. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but it seems like spring is only arriving now, and we've got hay fever, and every time I sneeze, my wife wants to rush me off for a COVID test. So I hope I don't sneeze in between. Eyes are watering, so I can just see my notes this morning, but let's give it a go, and let's go. I've spoken to a couple of compliance auditors. So we've seen a certain decline in the standard of work audited with no specific reason besides that maybe COVID has something to do with it. I don't know. So when Steve Brown asked me for a topic, the word compliance came to mind. Initially, I did not know why, but as I started putting the slideshow together and talking myself through the presentation, it became clear to me that the decline in standard of work is mostly because there's not a good understanding of the word compliance. Compliance is used in many different professional careers and businesses, and the basic composition of what compliance is made up of is the same, no matter what you are controlling or doing. You can see all the different words around the word compliance. As we go along, we will extract them and apply plumbing to them. The other problem we as plumbers have is that consumers do not understand compliance, and that makes our work difficult on another level before we even turn the water off to install a new geyser. So by explaining compliance to you in a way I made it understandable to myself, I'm hoping to give you as a plumber a better understanding of compliance, but not only that, also a way to enlighten the consumer you are trying to convince to install according to compliance, and why non-compliance could be detrimental to his health and that of others. So let's start with the word compliance. Compliance is to prevent or eliminate unlawful conduct. So that would be any conduct from a plumber, or unlawful conditions, and that would be your installation. So it's very simple. Eliminate unlawful conduct or unlawful conditions. So let's start extracting the words. One word that stands up about every time is law, regulation, standards. So what are the laws that govern us? It's the overarching laws, Water Services Act. That is a very important one. And we don't hear much about it. We don't read it much. And it's actually something we've got to understand. And that's something that will have to be taken up most probably later in the National Building Regulation, which is not there. So when you start talking to a consumer and they want to know what laws govern plumbing, start with the Water Services Act. Consumer Protection Act. The consumer needs to be protected. The act that came into legislation in 2008. So obviously the consumer wants to be protected, and that's the one that he's going to use against you if anything goes wrong. And then the other buzzword, Occupational Health and Safety Act. Every Tuesday morning we have this tech talk on the web on occupational health and safety. So that's a very, very important one nowadays, and that concerns the occupant of every house, and it's an important thing when an occupation certificate is going to be issued. All occupational health and safety hazards have to be removed in the premises. So those are the three. So you must try and remember them, so that as soon as the consumer talks to you and he wants to know what laws govern you, you've got the three: water services, consumer, and occupational health and safety. When you look at the Water Services Act, just recently I read an article that 10 billion rand of income to local authorities is being lost in the country due to water leaks because of non-compliant pipes and pipes incorrectly installed. And that accounts to about 31% of all water in the country, which is going lost and is unaccountable for. So that's quite a concern. So if you can even remember that number, 10 billion rand is lost of income to local authorities for the sale of water because of water loss in pipes. That's 31%. That's a great loss in a water scarce country. So regulation, let's pull the regulation out. What are the regulations that govern compliance? It's a National Building Regulation, SANS 10400 Part P. But there's only one section in there that we use, and that is Part P, except for A18, which is the governing of plumbers. And then obviously the next regulation would be the municipal bylaws. Municipal bylaws for each and every local authority. And then under regulation, we actually have SANS 10252 Part 2, which is drainage. And why is it under regulation? Because it's exactly the same as SANS 10400 Part P, which is in the National Building Regulation. And as I said, we actually need the Water Services Act to come down to regulation, but it's not there. But what is the part that we need there? Is water. And that's why we put SANS 10252, Part 1, which is water reticulation in buildings, under regulation. So now I'm going to read this part because I can't get it all correctly if I have to say it out of my head. So it says, this requirement was introduced through the Water Services Act. Insofar as the issuing of a certificate is concerned, SANS 10252 Part 1 does not expressly require the issuing of a certificate, but Regulation 14 of the regulations relating to compulsory national standards and measures to conserve water. Now, if you think of, I just said conserve water and we're losing 31% thereof, however, demands compliance, not only with SANS 10252, but also with SANS 10254. So the purpose of SANS 10252 Part 1 is this standard is to provide standards for the safe and correct installation of water supply installations for buildings and to ultimately demonstrate compliance with SANS 10252 Part 1, thereby giving effect to their purpose. A certificate must be issued. So it's very important, you know, it goes about water contamination and it goes about water loss. So very important for your consumer when you're trying to explain to him why it's important to issue a certificate of compliance. And then we have our mandatory installation standards. And that is it. That's all we have to know to convince a consumer about compliance. SANS 10254, all favor with that one, hot water, heat pumps, and solar. And that completes the word compliance. So if we look at compliance again, those words that are pulled out there, once again, protection of the consumer, laws, it's the Consumer Protection Act, Water Service Act, Occupational Health and Safety, regulations, National Building Regulation. Regulatory is SANS 10252 Part 1 and 2 and the bylaws. And then we have the standards, 10106, 1352, and 10254. And then the next morning you get a call or a picture on your WhatsApp and this is what you see. So then you start thinking, okay, how am I going to protect myself from this? What happened here? And obviously we can see this is a fire. So, and it's a solar installation. You can see the pipe running up to the roof. So what do? We pull out SANS 10106 and we start seeing how can we be protected against what happened here. So I'm just using SANS 10106 and the solar as a example here. And you can see the extent of the damage that was caused. So what does SANS 10106 say? So it says electrical installation. All electrical installation work, inclusive of any control and ancillary equipment, shall comply with the relevant national legislation and SANS 10142 Part 1, which is the electrical standard. Furthermore, in paragraph 9, it says a certificate of compliance from the professional body registered under the relevant national body, that is the PRB, shall be issued for the installation, replacement, or repair of any plumbing works inspected or where work has been carried out on the hot water reticulation system, which includes the installation of a solar system. Okay, well, so it's a fire. It's not my problem. But look at this. It says, all electrical installation work shall be undertaken in terms of the relevant national legislation by an electrical contractor who shall be duly registered in terms of, and the electrical certificate of compliance as prescribed shall be issued by the installer. So now we can go and pull that word apart. Installer, is it now the solar installer or the electrical installer? It doesn't matter in this case. If you install the solar and you connected it electrically, you're going to be held liable. So what is important is that a certificate of compliance in the case of a solar for the electrical part is issued, and you as installer must ensure that, because if something like that happens, you could be held liable for not making sure that the electrical certificate of compliance was issued, because it makes part of your installation. But okay, that was just an example. They're using solar.
Marius, just read that first part again, where it says the electrical, it states very clearly that the electrical must be done by a licensed electrician and a COC issue. Can you just read that part again, just for some clarity?
All electrical installation work shall be undertaken in terms of the relevant national legislation by an electrical contractor who shall duly be registered in terms of, and the electrical certificate of compliance as prescribed shall be issued by the installer. Yeah, and that is, if you go and look at the way that when you do your solar course as well, that is also made very clear that that is part of your installation and handover of that system is your electrical certificate, which you obtain most probably from the electrician after he has done the electrical connection, and you give it with the instructions for the solar to your client. So if we look at this extensive horrific damage that was caused by a 100-liter geyser to a roof, once again, you know, we can look at all these pictures and they're all out there, but we never see them in the media. And we look at the word compliance, you know, so what happened here? Who is going to manage the risk? Whose risk is this? And this is what is very important about compliance, is there's a risk involved. And you've got to manage this risk as the plumber. And actually, you can get rid of the risk. First of all, is how is a compliance certified? By completing a certificate of compliance from the professional body of the PRB. Why do you complete the certificate? To manage the management of risks and responsibility. By detailing the record of work that is done and reporting on non-compliances and record keeping of those non-compliances. So this is very important. You're detailing the work in that certificate, what you've done, and there is a record of the non-compliances, and the record is kept. And then it goes back, you've managed the risk and the responsibility once you've issued that certificate of compliance. If you haven't issued a certificate of compliance, you better hide, because if that explosion that we saw on that picture was your responsibility and you didn't manage that risk, it's your risk, and they're going to find you. And that is the problem. And that is why a COC is such a good thing, because it manages your risk and your responsibility for an installation. But obviously, you've got to detail that record of work, and you've got to know what the non-compliances are and record them. Because if you haven't done that, you still haven't managed the risk. And you still end up with that problem and responsible for it. So how would the risks and responsibilities have been managed? First of all, you completed your COC. You've written in the details of installation, and that's what we see on these certificate of compliances. It's just plumbing new house. That's not good enough. Details of the installation, put in there, put in 5 basins, supplied by the owner, non-compliant basins or traps or whatever the case may be, everything that you can fit in there. And with the new system, there's enough space to write in everything. So you record everything, because 2 weeks later down the line, you called out there and you see, but I didn't install this toilet or this basin, doesn't look like the one I put in there, so it's been changed. But if you've recorded it, it's there. It's there for your record and safekeeping and to protect you. So once again, if you put it in there, the plumber is still responsible and the risk is still with the plumber. So the next step is use approved products. So once you've used approved products and installed it to the manufacturer's specification, what happens to the risk? It becomes a shared responsibility and risk with the manufacturer, because first of all, you used an approved product. So there's a manufacturer who's known to the consumer and to you and to the industry, and you've installed it according to his specification. So he's becoming responsible for his product, because it's, first of all, it's approved and you followed these instructions. So then the next one, if you're using the standard installation done to the applicable SAN standard, so being 10106 solar or heat pump or 10254, what happens to the risk? The manufacturer becomes responsible and the risk moves towards him. And the only responsibility he has then and risk is the warranty, because everything is now done. It's an approved product, it's installed according to manufacturer specification, and this applicable standard has been followed. So what can go wrong for you? Because now you followed everything and you've removed that risk, and only the manufacturer has got a warranty responsibility. But then you find in old installations, you have a lot of other risks, non-compliances. The consumer wants to push you in a corner and say, well, I'm going to leave it like this. It's been like this for 20 years. I'm not going to change it. So then you list your non-compliances. So what have you done now with it? Is it your plumber's risk or the manufacturer's risk? No, it becomes the consumer's responsibility. So you've managed your risks and responsibilities by just using a PRB. So the person that doesn't want to use a COC is putting himself at risk, because he's going to remain responsible for that installation forever and ever until something goes wrong or somebody else works on it and issues a certificate of compliance again that day. So make sure that you've filled it in complete and that it's done properly. So First of all, is to prevent and eliminate unlawful conduct and unlawful conditions. That's the word compliance. So here's another word that comes out of it, the auditor. What does the auditor do? He audits compliance. Approved products have been used. That's one of the boxes he ticks. Have approved products been used? Approved product installed to the manufacturer specification. It's no use using an approved product, but you're using it totally incorrectly. Installed to the relevant installation standard. So you check, is this product installed and the standard has been followed? And audits non-compliance notice has been issued. So those are the four things. That's all that actually is being audited. Although we see a lot of long lists of things that go wrong in an installation, and when your auditor writes out the list, it's a long list of things. But those are actually the only four things. It goes about compliance: approved products installed to manufacturer specification and the relevant standard, and the audit non-compliance. And the auditor then becomes jointly liable with the plumber for installation in terms of the compliance. And that's why it's so important for me to talk about compliance, because no auditor wants to become jointly liable for a non-compliant installation. And that is one of the biggest problems. Non-approved products being used by plumbers and requested by consumers. Products not installed to manufacturer specification. Installations not complying to the installation standards. And plumbers not protecting themselves with a non-compliant notice if consumers does not want to upgrade installations or insist on non-compliant ways of installation. So this is what we get. Products being incorrectly installed, upside down geysers. The favorite one is the 200-liter geyser installed on top of the brackets and not the feet on the wall where it's supposed to be, with the approved brackets on the geyser at the bottom. Oversized geysers on walls. This is a 300-liter geyser up on a wall with unapproved brackets, non-compliant. Look at your manufacturer specification on the serial plate. It says what this geyser can be done with. Can go to the wall, can go horizontally, can be on the floor, on the roof. Pipes with its own fittings. Each and every pipe is approved with its own fitting. And if you cross over from one pipe to another, use a male-female connection to cross over from one pipe to another, because a manufacturer will not stand for his warranty if his fitting is not used with his pipe. Installation does not comply to the relevant installation standard. Non-approved kinds of holder bats being used, and similar metals. You can see the corrosion that occurs. So how to prevent failing audits? Become serious about compliance, as it could save you and your business. Use approved products. Install the product according to the manufacturer specification. Install to comply with the relevant regulation and installation standard. Non-compliance notices to be issued and issued correctly. Only four things. So train and mentor your personnel in the art of compliance. You see I made the art in blue, so those are the four. Do your work yourself or adequately supervise and control your work. SANS 10400 in the National Building Regulation A18 says that exactly. Adequately supervise and control. Make sure that you control the work. We know a lot of guys go out there, they send their teams out there, but they must control that work. There's no use sending them out there and trusting and thinking they are plumbers. They are not until the day they are licensed and qualified. So that is compliance. There's a lot of other words we can pull out of it, but that's in a nutshell.
Do we therefore leave a geyser pressurized but not electrically connected, in turn leaving the customer with a new geyser but one that is not going to heat up until they call an electrician?
Okay, that's quite contentious. That is actually, in actual fact, what should happen. That is according to the standard, because we are not electricians. But we know that these things are being electrically connected. And this is something that IOPSA is actively in talks with the Electrical Contractors Board at the moment, in seeing if there is a possibility of training plumbers in a short course. And years ago, apparently, there was something that was done like that. Some of the old plumbers would know. It was done where plumbers were shown how to do just a connection from the isolator to the geyser. We're looking to see if we can do that. But at the moment, as it stands, the electrical certificate is, or the electrical compliance is that an electrician must connect it electrically. So it's a very contentious issue at this stage. But that is for you to decide. When you do that, are you going to take the risk of electric connecting it? Because if you've done that, you are basically taking the responsibility thereof.
All right, thanks, Marius. Next question. Who is responsible for changing an element, the electrician or the plumber?
That is so many times we've had that question. That is one that we actually say to the electrical guys, listen, this is our geyser. So as soon as you take out that element, the water is going to come out. So that becomes a plumber's responsibility. So it can't be yours. But then the electrician says, but you can't disconnect the geyser, you know. So it's a very contentious issue once again. But the responsibility to change, or well, not the responsibility, and plumber can change an element in a geyser. Yes. So if you switch it off at the isolator, it's switched off, you can remove that element. I cannot see why not.
An electrician only gives a COC if it is compliant. A plumber gives a non-compliant. I'm not sure if that's a question. Do you understand, Marius?
Yeah, I think I get it. It goes about that our certificate has made provision for non-compliant items, where a electrical certificate of compliance, the ones that I've seen, does not make provision for non-compliances. But now, if you look at electrical, and I had exactly that same, where consumers said to me, yes, but I can understand why you're given a COC for electrical work, because you can shock and you can get killed, but with water you can only get wet. So that is a very dumb argument anyway. But with electrical work, yes, that would be so that there should not be any non-compliances, because it is detrimental. You can die, you know. So there shouldn't be anything, and they do not have non-compliances. And that should be in plumbing as well. That would be in the ideal world. We will also want that in plumbing. But as we know, there are so many installations out there that are non-compliant, and we sit with a consumer that has to be educated to change and bring all installations to compliance. So that would be the reason, most probably, I think, why you'll have no non-compliances on the electrical certificate. And their certificate was designed differently to ours, with different people giving different inputs in mind. So I cannot speak for the electrical guys, but that is what I can answer to that question.
Am I understanding correct? Electrical connection from isolator falls under my COC, same as bonding.
No, not at this stage. We do not have any clear-cut answer on that. At this stage, it just says that you must ensure that the geyser is connected according to SANS 10142 electrically. And if you go to the electrical standard, I'm not exactly sure, I can't record exactly the words there, but it will mean that an electrician must connect it. So at this stage, it's not clear yet. So until such time, be safe out there, and ensure that if geyser has to be connected, that you do not end up with the responsibility of connecting that geyser.
Yeah, Marius, just a quick one. I see a lot of questions this morning with regards to electrical, and again, you know, very grey areas. So just to put everybody in the picture, we have engaged with two electrical individuals that are part of IOPSA and PIRB, and they're busy putting a presentation together in terms of that under correction. I think it's around about the 26th. Where we're going to be discussing these particular points and covering these grey areas and things like that. So just watch out for that, and that will hopefully bring some clarity.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I think let's just make a note. I'm making a red note here on my desk calendar for the 26th. I think that will answer a lot of the questions on electrical. Thank you very much. Anything else, Ruben?
Yes, Marius, next one. How do I issue a COC on a house that has a geyser and a solar if my license does not include solar installation?
It's quite easy. You do not, because you're not licensed to be able to do that. That is, you must have the designation for solar, and that is exactly. And while we are talking about this, let me add to that one. When you're just replacing a geyser and it's connected to a solar, you must have a solar designation. Because how can you go and identify the non-compliances in terms of the solar installation if you haven't done the course and if you're not licensed to do it? So it's not the area that you can then go and work on, you will have to get somebody that is licensed to do it. So you cannot go and issue a certificate of compliance. First of all, we don't have one that is designed for that purpose yet. So for the sale of a property and you're going to do just an inspection, you will use an inspection report where you write a report on the non-compliances and the compliances and whatever the installation concerns are. But you will then not be able to note the non-compliances because you're not licensed to do so. So if something goes wrong and there's a claim, the new owner comes and he says, but my solar is not working, there's something wrong with the solar, but you issued a report or a COC for that matter on the system, you're going to be held liable to correct it because you've now issued a report to say that this installation complies. You cannot do that. So you have to be licensed to do it. It's like you must have a license to drive a car. That's as simple as that. And thank you very much for you guys listening out there this morning. And thanks a lot and have a good day, you guys.